What if your soul had a roadmap, written over 3,000 years ago? A sacred text not of mythology, but of instruction, not meant for the living, but for the dead. You'll discover how the ancient Egyptians prepared for death, not with fear, but with detailed guidance. You'll witness the weighing of the heart, the most critical judgment a soul can face. You'll learn spells that promise to unlock divine gates, transform the spirit, and protect it from oblivion. This was not called the Book of the Dead by its creators. They called it the Book of Coming Forth by Day, a powerful collection of wisdom meant to guide the soul into the next life. And within it lies a truth that has been buried in plain sight, a truth you were never meant to forget. The Book of the Dead did not emerge overnight. It was the culmination of a long tradition of Egyptian funerary texts, refined over centuries of spiritual evolution. Ancient Egypt was divided into three major historical periods. The Old Kingdom, which was around 2686 to 2181 BCE, known as the Age of the Pyramids, saw pharaohs like Khufu build monumental tombs and inscribe sacred prayers inside them. The Middle Kingdom, 2055 to 1650 BCE, marked a cultural awakening where the afterlife became more accessible, and nobles began inscribing spells inside wooden coffins. The New Kingdom, which was around 1550 to 1070 BCE, was Egypt's golden age of power and magic, when the Book of the Dead, as we know it, took form. Elaborate scrolls, vivid illustrations, and personalized guidance for the soul. In the Old Kingdom, around 2500 BCE, pharaohs had prayers carved into their pyramid walls. We call these the pyramid texts. Later, in the Middle Kingdom, nobles inscribed similar spells on the inside of coffins, the coffin texts. These early spells were the seeds that would blossom into the Book of the Dead in the New Kingdom. By around 1550 BCE, at the dawn of the New Kingdom, scribes began compiling collections of magical spells on papyrus scrolls. This new funerary text was individualized for the deceased and often buried with them. There was no single book. Each scroll was a custom collection of chapters chosen for that person's soul. Wealthy patrons commissioned beautifully illustrated papyri filled with spells and vivid vignettes, while those with modest means might afford only a few chapters or a simpler version written in cursive hieratic script. For centuries, these scrolls lay buried in tombs. Fast forward to 1842, Carl Richard Lepsius publishes a collection of these texts and dubs them Totenbuch, German for Book of the Dead. The name stuck, but the ancient Egyptians had their own title, which translated to Spells of Coming Forth by Day, reflecting their belief that the deceased soul would emerge each day with the rising sun. Over a span of more than a millennium from 1550 BCE, the Book of the Dead evolved. New spells were added, others modified. By the 26th dynasty, a standardized version known as the Sa'it recension organized many of the spells in a fixed sequence. Eventually, in the late periods, the Egyptians began using shorter works like the Book of Breathing, and the tradition of the Book of the Dead slowly faded. But its legacy endured, preserved in the papyri found in tombs from Thebes to the Delta. The Papyrus of Ani is a prime example. Created around 1250 BCE for a scribe named Ani, this 78-foot scroll is lavishly illustrated and contains many of the key spells. It's a window into ancient beliefs, showing us scenes of judgment, offerings, and paradise. Each stroke of hieroglyphs on these papyri was carefully written to ensure Ani's soul could overcome every obstacle in the afterlife. This was not an occult manual or an Egyptian Bible in the modern sense. It was a practical guide to eternity, commissioned out of love for life and the hope that it could continue forever. To the ancient Egyptians, death was not an end but a transition. They imagined the afterlife as the field of reeds, an eternal reflection of their best life on earth. It was a realm where golden fields of grain grew tall, where one could stroll beside cool waters and beneath shade trees forever. In an inscription from around 1400 BCE, an Egyptian longs for this paradise. May I walk every day unceasing on the banks of my water. May my soul rest on the branches of the trees I have planted. May I refresh myself in the shadow of my sycamore. Reaching this paradise required that a person live in accordance with Ma'at, the principle of truth, justice, and cosmic order personified by a goddess with an ostrich feather on her head. The Egyptians believed the soul had many parts, including the Ka, vital essence, Ba, mobile soul or personality often depicted as a human-headed bird, and the Akh, transformed spirit, all of which needed to be tended. Proper mummification preserved the body, the Ka's anchor, and tomb offerings sustained the Ka's need for nourishment. Funerary spells, in turn, empowered the Ba to reunite with the body and travel freely, and ultimately transform into an Akh, an effective spirit worthy of joining the gods. Every aspect of the funerary ritual was designed to ensure the deceased awoke in the next world with their faculties intact. Spells were even written on the linen bandages, on coffin walls, and on amulets tucked among the wrappings. This redundancy layering spells in multiple places was a safeguard so that if one copy was damaged, another would still function. For example, a heart scarab amulet might be placed over the heart, often inscribed with spell 30B of the Book of the Dead. Its purpose was to magically silence the heart, preventing it from testifying against the deceased during judgment. Ancient Egyptians understood that no one lived a life entirely free of wrongdoing. Thus, they approached death not with despair, but with preparation. With the right knowledge, the right spells, they believed they could overcome any trial in the afterlife. The Book of the Dead was, in essence, a toolkit to cheat fate in a righteous way and tilt the scales towards salvation. But the journey to the field of reeds was long and perilous. Before a soul could set foot in these eternal fields of plenty, it had to pass through the ultimate judgment in the Hall of Two Truths. There the heart would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at. The outcome of this trial would determine the soul's destiny, eternal life among the gods, or eternal silence in oblivion. This is the Hall of Two Truths, where no lie can remain hidden. In this iconic vignette from spell 125 of the Book of the Dead, we see Ani's heart weighed against the feather of truth. If a lifetime of virtue made his heart as light as the feather, Ani will be declared Makiru, true of voice, justified and welcomed into the afterlife. But if guilt and wrongdoing have made his heart heavy, the scales will tip, and his heart will be cast to Ammit, the devourer of souls. Imagine the silence in that hall, broken only by the creak of the scales. The Egyptians believed the heart recorded all of one's deeds and thoughts. Anubis, jackal-headed patron of embalming, guides the deceased through the ritual and operates the scale. Thoth, the lunar god of wisdom and writing, stands by to inscribe the verdict on his tablet. He is the divine court reporter. Presiding over all is Osiris, lord of the underworld, to whom the final decision belongs. Spell 125 also contains the negative confession, a remarkable declaration of innocence. The deceased addresses each of the 42 divine judges by name, denying a specific sin before each. It's a creed of moral conduct, a way to affirm that one has lived a life in accord with Ma'at. In the Papyrus of Ani, the scribe proclaims, one by one, "Hail Useknemt, coming from Heliopolis, I have not committed sin. Hail Heptket, coming from Karaha, I have not stolen. Hail Amkaibit, coming from Kermet, I have done no murder. Hail Neva, who comes and goes, I have spoken no lies. Hail Nehau, coming from Rasta, I have not defrauded offerings." These are a few of the 42 clauses Ani would recite, known as the Declaration of Innocence. Line by line, Ani denies committing violence, theft, deceit, adultery, blasphemy, and many other offenses. Through these spell-like affirmations, the soul attempts to prove its purity. The Egyptians believed that words had power. By speaking these negations, the deceased literally casts away each sin, hoping the heart will not speak out with guilt in the divine scales. If the scales balance, Thoth announces the deceased through a voice. The relieved soul can now proceed. Osiris and the 42 judges acknowledge the person's purity. But if the heart had been heavy, a far worse fate awaited. Thoth would record failure, and Ammit would lunge forward to devour the heart, condemning the soul to the second death, utter annihilation. To the Egyptians, non-existence was the most terrifying punishment of all. Thanks to the guidance of spell 125, Ani, in our story, is found worthy. But his journey isn't over. Now he must actually enter the afterlife realm. In some accounts, even a justified soul had to navigate further trials or gates to reach the final paradise. For this, additional spells from his Book of the Dead would guide him. The next acts of our documentary will explore those magical spells and the paradise that awaits the righteous. The texts we call the Book of the Dead contain approximately 190 spells, chapters known so far, though no single papyrus contains them all. These spells served many purposes, from empowering the soul with knowledge, to protecting it from harm, to transforming it into different forms. They were essentially a traveler's guide to the afterlife, providing passwords, magical formulas, and rituals that the deceased would need. Some spells are hymns and praises to gods, aligning the soul with divine forces. Others are practical how-to guides. For example, spell 6, the Ushabti spell, was recited over small servant figurines called Ushabti. This spell animates the figurine to answer on behalf of the deceased whenever manual labor is required in the field of reeds. The text of spell 6 declares that if the gods call upon the dead to till the fields or irrigate the land, the Ushabti shall reply, "Here I am," and do the work, allowing the owner to relax in paradise while the figurines labor in their stead. Many spells were illustrated with vignettes. For instance, spell 17, a complex text about creation and the nature of the gods, is accompanied by images of the primordial ocean, the Eye of Horus, and a head rising from a coffin. Red ink rubrics often mark the start of spells, a visual cue to the reader, and perhaps the priest conducting funeral rites. The most striking spells allowed the deceased to transform into various forms, to truly become an Auk, a glorified spirit. One might need to take on divine shapes. Spells 76 through 88 are transformation spells. With these, the soul could soar as a falcon, slither as a snake, or shine as a lotus blossom at dawn. By these transformations, the deceased could travel freely or gain the powers of gods. In spell 76, the deceased triumphantly declares, "I am the pure lotus which sprang from the sunshine, which is at the nose of Ra, the sun god." In spell 83, the soul takes flight as the Bennu bird, phoenix. "I have risen like the Bennu, the soul of Ra, and I fly, scene inferred from spell context. And in spell 88, the deceased boldly claims the might of a crocodile god. "I am Sobek, in the midst of his terrors. I am Sobek who seizes with fierceness." By identifying with gods and sacred creatures, the Egyptians believed the soul could secure their attributes: strength, freedom, rebirth. One spell even allowed the deceased to become Thoth himself, the very author of divine words. Another equated the soul with Ra, the sun, so it could be reborn each day at dawn. The Book of the Dead was not merely read, it was implemented. Scribes and priests would enact these spells during the mummification rites and the funeral, placing scrolls in the coffin, positioning amulets like the heart scarab near the mummy's heart, and figurines at the feet of the deceased. Everything was done according to ritual, so that in the mystic space between death and rebirth, these words would come alive. We have seen Ani confront the weighing of his heart with spell 125. We have watched as spells turned servants to life and let him assume divine forms. Now, at last, it is time to follow Ani's spirit through the final door into the field of reeds, the eternal world that all these texts have been preparing him for. At last, the journey is complete. Having been found worthy, Ani steps into Seke Aru, the field of reeds. In some descriptions, he had to pass through a series of gates guarded by spirits on the way, but his Book of the Dead would have provided the necessary spells or secret names to get through each. The ancient artists portrayed the fields of reeds much like an ideal Egypt. We find Ani making offerings to strange deities with hair, serpent, and bullheads, perhaps local gods of various provinces. He is shown plowing a field, sowing and reaping tall grain with the help of oxen. But unlike on earth, this farm work is joyful and abundant, free of toil and pests. The texts assure there are no snakes or vermin in these fields. In one scene, Ani stands before a table of offerings, declaring he is at peace in the field and enjoys breathable air and plentiful food. All that was lost in death is restored to him: health, vigor, contentment, and reunion with loved ones. Yet, even in paradise, the Egyptians expected life to continue much as before: farming, eating, drinking, loving, only without pain or sorrow. To ensure they could enjoy these pleasures, they brought along the tools and helpers via magic. For instance, the grain Ani reaps in the painting might have grown from magical seeds placed in his tomb, and the labor could be done by his Ushabti servants when he grew weary. Death for the Egyptians was not a leap into the unknown. It was coming home to a perfected Egypt where life would go on forever by the grace of the gods. The Book of the Dead was the ancient Egyptian answer to a universal question: what comes after death, and how do we make it a good thing? Their answer was both spiritual and practical. Lead a life in balance with Ma'at, prepare diligently with the proper rituals and knowledge, and you can overcome death itself. The spells were a means to an end. The goal was not to dominate through magic, but to reunite with the light of the sun each day and to roam the eternal reeds in peace. Yet, even in paradise, the Egyptians expected life to continue much as before: farming, eating, drinking, loving, only without pain or sorrow. To ensure they could enjoy these pleasures, they brought along the tools and helpers via magic. For instance, the grain Ani reaps in the painting might have grown from magical seeds placed in his tomb, and the labor could be done by his Ushabti servants when he grew weary. Death for the Egyptians was not a leap into the unknown. It was coming home to a perfected Egypt where life would go on forever by the grace of the gods. The Book of the Dead was the ancient Egyptian answer to a universal question: what comes after death, and how do we make it a good thing? Their answer was both spiritual and practical. Lead a life in balance with Ma'at, prepare diligently with the proper rituals and knowledge, and you can overcome death itself. The spells were a means to an end. The goal was not to dominate through magic, but to reunite with the light of the sun each day and to roam the eternal reeds in peace. Before we close, there is one final offering. In ancient Egypt, the soul's journey wasn't just measured by rituals or scrolls. It was measured by the purity of the heart. Spell 125 in the Book of the Dead is known for its negative confession, a declaration of innocence spoken before 42 divine judges. But beneath it lies something deeper: a moral code, a sacred inventory for the soul. What if you could create your own version of that today? Not as a list of what you have or haven't done, but as a commitment to live in alignment with the truth in your heart. If you'd like to go deeper, stay with us. A guided reflection begins now.
Take a moment to be still. If you can, close your eyes. Inhale slowly and exhale. Imagine yourself arriving in the field of reeds, the eternal paradise of ancient Egypt. The air is warm and sweet. The golden reeds sway in the breeze. You walk barefoot through soft grasses, beside calm waters reflecting the sun. Birds call gently in the distance. Loved ones smile at you from across the field. You're whole, you're free, you're seen. And as your spirit rests in this place of peace, say this out loud or in your mind. I speak with honesty, even when it's difficult. I act with kindness in both words and silence. I keep my promises and honor my commitments. I take nothing that is not mine. I respect the sacredness of every life. I honor others' boundaries and needs. I give generously without expecting return. I release judgment and lead with compassion. I seek truth over convenience. I forgive myself and others to remain free. I take full responsibility for my choices. I listen more than I speak. I protect the vulnerable when I can. I create more than I consume. I uplift others with my words and presence. I cherish the earth and live lightly upon it. I walk away from what dishonors my soul. I move through life with gratitude and grace. I honor my body as a sacred vessel. I nourish my mind with truth and wisdom. I use my time with purpose. I follow through on what I start. I welcome silence and listen within. I honor rest and do not glorify busyness. I stand up for justice even when it's uncomfortable. I speak when my voice can be of service. I do not betray trust for personal gain. I align with integrity, not image. I value presence over performance. I release the need to be right. I do not speak what would poison hearts. I allow others to grow at their own pace. I walk in humility, even when I lead. I bless what I cannot control. I do not manipulate through fear or guilt. I stay grounded in love, not reaction. I protect my energy with clear boundaries. I express my truth without violence. I honor the sacred in all spiritual paths. I seek balance, not perfection. I live in alignment with what I value. I leave behind a legacy of love and truth. Take a deep breath.
As we close this hidden knowledge quest, we reflect on the legacy of the Book of the Dead. Thousands of years later, these texts allow us to hear the hopes and prayers of people long gone. In the scratched ink on fragile papyrus, a voice from 1200 BCE whispers,
"May my soul live on, and my name never be forgotten."
The Egyptians achieved a form of immortality, not just in their hope for paradise, but here in our world, as their writings and names are still remembered today. Thank you for watching. Join us next time as we unearth another secret from the ancient world. Until then, let Mayat be with you on your own journey through life.